Hou is nie my vriende, FAL hierso. Onthou jy nog die ou dae as ons vriende in die noorde gehad het? In hulle se army, die Rhodesiese weermag, en deskundige geword op teen-insurgensieoorlogvoering gedurende die Bosoorlog. En hulle wapen van keuse was die bekende FN of R1. Hey guys, FAL guy here. In today's video, we're going to look at something really cool, and that is the Rhodesian FAL. This video is about the historical aspect of a firearm that has influenced generations during and after the Rhodesian Bush War. It's a video about the rifle that has done good and bad, and we'll leave it at that. There's no room for any political discussion, no room for any racism. Everybody or anybody that comments anything racist or stupid or inappropriate or political in this video will get their comment deleted and blocked from my account. It's a history about a firearm. Same way as other people talk about the history of the AK, the history of the AR-15, or whether other rifle system you're going to watch a video about. So let's get started and look at the super unique history of the Rhodesian FAL.
Step out, look, watch my strike. Turn it. Wait. Get down.
I don't ever slow up, no I don't take shit. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up. I don't ever slow up, no I don't take shit. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up and make a statement. I don't ever slow up, no I don't take shit. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up and make a statement. Everything I do so instinctive and so passionate. Every word I move so descriptive like an adjective. I got a vendetta against people who patented being negative when you should be getting after it. I got facts over tracks, this and that. Spitting slow, spitting fast. I could roast, I could gas. Think I'm okay at last, but I don't know if that can erase all the past. And the pettiness, a reflection of the emptiness. Hilarious, you think you're worth my time, you're delirious. Mysterious, because you hide behind a fake exterior. Inferior, you know I'll always be a bit superior. Get off of me, this ain't no humble brag. I want you to hear words, you can say them back. I want you to...
So we just watched a short video on the Black Boots at their battle camp in Goromonzi. And as you've seen, their FALs were all painted. And they look pretty good, didn't they? So anyhow, we all have a connection to, some sort of connection to Rhodesian FALs. We've either seen them in memes, on YouTube, in videos, maybe in video games. I know that Call of Duty did one years ago in their Modern Warfare. So everybody has seen something about the Rhodesian FALs, but not many people did an in-depth review and video on what exactly was that FAL that was used, how did it start, how did it end, and what kind of accessories were made and how were they equipped. And that is the purpose of this video. Also want to say thank you to one of my awesome followers. His name is Andy. He runs an Instagram account. Link is below. He helped me tremendously with digging into the history of the Rhodesian FALs. Also, his Instagram account is awesome. He has a lot of history about the Rhodesian FALs, the Rhodesian security forces, their gear, their weaponry, etc. After World War II, the entire world was figuring out a new way to equip their armies with a good rifle. The era of the bolt action and Garand M1 was over. So people estimate that in the early 50s, Winston Churchill and Henry Truman made the agreement that they are going to develop the 30 cal cartridge. And with Dieudonné Sev already having developed an FAL type rifle on that cartridge system, people expected this rifle to become the new rifle of the Western world. However, the US went with their M14, and that's a story for another video, and the British chose the FAL, however, in an inch pattern design, meaning that all the measurements were done in inch. So that's why we have an inch and a metric version of the rifle. And there were some other differences in that rifle, but that's also a topic for a different video. So in 1954, Canada was the first nation to place an order for 2,000 FALs. They were known at that time FAL Canada, and they were exceptionally well-built rifles. Came straight from Belgium, and this was the first contract that FN won with that rifle. Shortly after, the entire world followed. The British were adamant that they have their own version of it, which ended up to being an inch measured version of the FAL. The British called their inch pattern rifle the L1A1 SLR, self-loading rifle. And they started equipping their own forces and their Commonwealth forces with that rifle. So that meant that their colonies in Africa received the SLR rifle. And we all know that Rhodesia at the time was part of the British Commonwealth. They were called Southern Rhodesia, part of, again, the British Empire. So their forces in turn received the SLR rifle. The first known SLR to hit Rhodesian soil was in 1959 with the SAS. There's also a newspaper article from the Bulawayo Chronicles that in 1960, the first SLR was issued to a Rhodesian soldier, to Private Crawthorne. So I don't know which one is right, whether it's 1959 or 1960, but it must have been around that time frame that the SLRs made it to Rhodesia. Up until 1965, the SLR was being sent to the Commonwealth Forces of Rhodesia. On November 11th, 1965, Rhodesia declared its unilateral declaration of independence, meaning they declared themselves independent from the UK, and immediately were hit with sanctions. That meant no SLRs for Rhodesia, so no more rifles. Now the big question came up among the Rhodesian security forces on how to equip their soldiers and their army with battle rifles. So let's talk about the different rifles that made into Rhodesia. So first of all, as we established before, the SLRs found their way into the Rhodesian armories. The other rifles that we saw in use in Rhodesia were G1s. The German G1s were initially supplied to Portugal after the Germans decided to go with the G3. And Portugal, which had no use for the G1, sold these to Rhodesia. Portugal and Rhodesia were on friendly terms back in the days up until 1974. The third type of FAL that saw use in Rhodesia was early made FN FALs. They got to the country either through shady businessmen or through South Africa, who had a surplus of these rifles. And the fourth one was the South African R1s, who made their way up to Rhodesia. There were also a number of FALs, heavy barrel FALs, that were used in Rhodesia. I don't know how they got into the country, but there is photo evidence of these being in use. So what makes the Rhodesian FAL so unique? The first one is that the R1s that got supplied to Rhodesia had a hole in the receiver. That's where the Union crest of the South African Defense Force of South Africa was on there. They just drilled a hole straight through the receiver and sanitized the rifle that way. Secondly, all Rhodesian FALs had their own prefix to the serial number. And the prefix was an RA that was put on the upper and the lower receiver and the bolt and bolt carrier. There were no markings on the barrels or on the magazines. Lastly, it was the paint. Most Rhodesian FALs as we know them today got painted in the aircraft colors commonly known as baby poop. It was a mustard yellow and a forest green color that got applied to the FALs. Rumors have it that in 1976, the terrorists got captured and told the security forces that they could easily spot the Rhodesian soldiers with their black rifles moving towards them. Hence, the Comm Ops issued the order to have all the Rhodesian all their FALs painted in the aircraft colors. There have been various types of paint scheme done. as you can see in these pictures. There are either stripes on the rifles or little dots on it. There is a variety of it. Most of the time, it was only two colors, which is the yellow and the green. Every once in a while, the green and the yellow got mixed to create a third color. So you have the yellow and the green mixed, and you have the green on it. I have one example of that, and that is my magazine. That is a 30-round magazine that was given to me by a friend of mine in South Africa. Also want to talk about the Rhodesian lettering on the FAL stock. I've seen so many people put yellow or red rack numbers on the stocks thinking they're widely used in Rhodesia. That was not the case. Most of the rifles that carry these big letterings, as far as I understand it, as far as I've been told, were rifles that were used during training. Afterwards, there were either no numbers on them, on the FALs that got issued to the frontline troops, or they had small little numbers on the inside of the stock, as you can see in this picture. So there never was these big letters on the side of the stock with troops that were operating in the operational areas. So just to clear up some misconception. Parafolding FALs available in Rhodesia. They were not very common though. Most parafolding stocks came from South Africa and or were captured during Operation Dingo at the Chimoio raid in 1977. So parafolders were not common at all, but they did exist. I'm aware of only the SAS having these parafolders on a more common basis. The other big thing that the Rhodesians did to their FALs was cut down the barrels. Quite often the FAL barrels were either too shot out or got bent or damaged during their parajumps or fire force, so they cut down the barrels. As you can see in these two pictures, the FALs or short FALs were actually used by RLI soldiers on fire force missions. We also have these pictures of internal affairs walking around with a shorter FAL. I have not found any evidence that the BSAP carried a trunk gun with a shorter barrel, even though the famous Green Book states they did. I've not found any photographic evidence, so maybe that exists and maybe not. But anyhow, it shows there were some shorter FALs in use in Rhodesia, but they were not common at all. And they were 21-inch FALs that were just cut down. So another thing that the Rhodesians did on their FALs was mount a pistol grip to the front of their handguard. We see them in this picture, a Rhodesian soldier, I think is an RLI soldier, getting out of a chopper with a front grip on his FAL. We also have this image of an INTEF warrant officer with a pistol grip on his FAL and a shorter FAL. So that is one modification the Rhodesians did. Another interesting modification is the Halbek device. The Halbek device, there are numerous videos on it, what they do, is basically a device that goes to the front of your muzzle brake and closes down ports, opens up other ports, and pushes your rifle down when you rapid fire it. The Rhodesians designed the Halbek device, and it was in use with some security forces, as you see on this picture. Another interesting thing that the Rhodesians did to their FALs was design this weird muzzle compensator. I've never seen one in real life. I don't know how it worked, but I just know it does exist. I mean, it would be cool to see how one of these works, but I don't know. Maybe somebody has one. In the short clip that we watched at the beginning of this video about the Black Boots training, we saw scopes. Some Rhodesians mounted scopes on their FALs. These were not sniper rifles. These were not DMRs. This was just an attempt to get more out of your own rifle. And it was done on an individual basis. They were not unit issued rifles. So don't be like, oh, the Rhodesians had snipers. They did not. We have a bunch of pictures of Rhodesian soldiers with scopes on their FALs. So obviously the one from the video at the beginning. And we can tell it's a very simple scope. I don't know what power it is. I have no clue what type of scope. And this scope mount is very crudely done. It's most likely steel rings welded to the dust cover. We also have this type of scope mount and this type of scope mount. So these are the ones that I'm aware of. There are probably more out there that were done on individual basis. There were hunting scopes that were mounted in FALs. I don't know how accurate they were. I don't know how well they ran, but it was one thing that it did. And I can guarantee you, we will try it out and see whether it's worth it or not. Talking about scopes and optics, the Rhodesians also used single point optics, like this one. That is my single point optic that I acquired a couple of years ago. It has the RA serial number on it, and it mounts on the dust, or it mounts on the FAL. You just place the dust cover and mount the new one on there with the single point optic. It's an OEG optic. We also have a bunch of pictures of these being in use, mostly for recruiting purposes, because they're all used on recruiting posters. Now let's talk about magazines. Magazines is something weird and wonderful because, as we all know, magazines are super scarce nowadays. And back in the days in Rhodesia, it was not much different. They had an abundance, not an abundance, but they had a lot of L1A1 magazines for the SLR. And as we all know, they don't fit the metric pattern rifles unless you did some modifications to the front lug of the magazines, which the Rhodesians did. So they cut down the front lug to fit the metric receiver, and you can see some grinding marks if you ever get a real Rhodesian magazine, and they still retained the inch pattern floor plate. The Rhodesians also converted some Bren mags to fit their metric FALs. Again, these were not very common either. However, they also made Bren mags in Rhodesia. And the interesting fact about these mags was that they were straight Bren mags, not the curved ones as we all know them. They were straight mags, and they were designed for the Bren, and then they got converted to fit the metric FAL. So there are a bunch of pictures and reports of these mags being in use with the Rhodesian security forces. And I remember a couple of years ago, I talked to my uncle who served in the RLI, and he stated that they had these magazines, but they had to maintain them constantly. One of the major issues with the 30 rounders was the spring getting too weak. So they had to extend them every once in a while, oil them, clean the inside of the mag well to ensure, not of the mag well, but the inside of the mag, to ensure that they ran properly. But yes, 30 rounders were made in Rhodesia and were used in the metric FALs. Obviously, if you had an inch pattern SLR, you were lucky because the mags would not need any conversion. Of note is that the Rhodesians never made any metric magazines in Rhodesia. The only ones they did, 30 rounders for the Brens and the conversion of the inch pattern to the metric magazines. As you talked before about the modification of the Rhodesian FALs, most of them had their carry handle cut off. Reason why was because one soldier got injured in a firefight when the brass hit his eye and he lost vision due to that. So most Rhodesian FALs have no carry handle. They also don't have a sling, or most of them don't have a sling, because the argument was that a sling will catch on to bush and webbing and whatever that is not supposed to catch on. So most of them have no sling either. Of note is that the SLRs that were initially supplied to the Commonwealth forces of Southern Rhodesia and later found its way into the hands of the Rhodesian security forces after UDI were mostly retained for rear echelon units, or the BSAP. Only during the later stages of the war, these SLRs were either used for spares, so they're cannibalized and their parts were used in the Rhodesian FALs, or they were issued to BSAP or rear echelon units. Of note is that the Rhodesians were always short on reliable weapons. Sometimes the barrels were shot out on their FALs, and it was very hard to fix them because they didn't have enough spares. So the Rhodesians did acquire a lot of G3s from South Africa and Portugal after the end of the Portuguese Empire. So the Grey Scouts, the RAR, and some other rear echelon units used the G3, which were Portuguese-built FMP. The G3s that were supplied by Portugal were not the most popular firearms. However, whenever somebody pulled the trigger, they went boom, and they did their job. The Palmer furniture on the G3s, however, were prone to cracking, so there's that. Anyhow, so many people wonder what happened to the FALs after April of 1980, when Mugabe won in a landslide victory and majority rule was implemented. Many of these FALs were decommissioned. Some were sold to South African arms dealers or to other arms dealers across the world. Some of these kits ended up in civilian hands in South Africa. A good buddy of mine actually has a Rhodesian FAL. Others were chopped up to bits and pieces and made their way to the US or to European markets. That's why you can still find some floating around on used or second-hand gun markets. And some were retained by Mugabe. Mugabe also, or the Zimbabwe National Army, also procured more FALs, which were mostly in-bell FALs. Of note is that some of these came with a wooden stock, and they were most in the 21-inch configuration. As you can see on this picture, we see Zimbabwe National Army soldiers with interesting fiberglass para-helmet from the Rhodesian era and FALs. I couldn't find the exact date for when the picture was taken. I believe it was during the oust of Mugabe, so in 2019, but I'm not 100% sure. If someone has more details, please enlighten me, comment in the comment section below. Another side note, Rhodesians refer to the FN FALs as the FN. Same as the South Africans refer to the FN FALs as R1s. Many of you are asking, how can I get a Rhodesian FAL here in the US? Well, there are not that many easy ways to get one. One way is to procure a DS Arms FAL, which they are the only FAL manufacturer here in the US, and then paint it accordingly with the Arizona Response System paint kit. Link is in the description below. That way you can get a FAL that resembles one that was used in Rhodesia and briefly during the transitional period in the Zimbabwe National Army. However, it is not a true deal. We all know that. So another way that you can acquire, hint, hint, or get some mix between a US-made receiver and barrel and Rhodesian parts kit is if you buy a parts kit online. These are hard to find, but as I stated previously, parts kits were sold to the US and to various arms dealers after the end of Rhodesia. So that might be another way on how you can get a parts kit. Or if you live in South Africa and you're extremely lucky, you might get a real Rhodesian FAL. I hope you enjoyed this video on the Rhodesian FAL. As we all know, the FAL is an inherently cool weapon, and we all got somehow in touch with the FAL or the Rhodesian FAL one way or another through pictures, videos, memes, you name it. Again, I want to emphasize that the rifle itself is not a racist rifle. It is what people think about it, what people make about it, and what people state online. I showed you ways on how you can make your own if you wanted to get one, and also where you can find some parts and the different things that the Rhodesians did during their time to their FALs, such as scopes, magazines, Halbek devices, etc. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you learned something, or that you were just here for the history. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, or if any stories to share, please do so in the comments below. Please be aware, I don't allow anything that is inappropriate. I also want to say thank you to my followers. If you got time, comment, like, and subscribe. I've got my Instagram in the link below. I also have my Twitter down below, because we all know Twitter is a different kind of world of social media. It's a little bit more freer, and I try to get a foothold there as well. So thank you very much for watching this video, and you all have a good day. Cheers.